He needed a wife for 1 year, but his single rule made falling in love a catastrophic mistake. The Grand Hotel ballroom was a universe of polished marble and false smiles. For Lily, a painter struggling to make ends meet, it felt like an alien landscape. She clung to her simple clutch, acutely aware of every critical glance at her thrift store dress. Meanwhile, across the vast room, Dr. Alexander Vance was trapped in his own gilded cage. His mother, a vision in couture, was subtly pointing out a woman whose family tree was practically American royalty. "It's time for a suitable match, Alexander," she murmured over the classical music. His jaw set. After his painful divorce, these social maneuvers felt like a prison. His eyes, searching for an escape, found hers. He saw a woman who appeared just as out of place as he felt, her intelligent eyes flashing with a mix of pride and discomfort. He watched, his blood heating, as a smug guest dripping with arrogance cornered her. "You must be new staff," the man sneered, his gaze a dismissive insult. "Be a darling and fetch me a refill." The public humiliation was a physical blow. Lily's cheeks burned, her composure cracking. And in that instant, Alexander saw his chance. It was a mad, impulsive decision, fueled by his own desperation and a sudden, fierce need to protect her. He strode across the ballroom, a man on a mission, the crowd instinctively parting for him. He ignored the offensive man completely, his focus entirely on Lily. He leaned close, his voice a low, intimate whisper meant only for her. "Pretend you're my wife." Lily stared, stunned. It was Dr. Alexander Vance, the billionaire cardiologist whose face was on magazine covers. "What?" she breathed. "Trust me," he murmured, a thrilling, dangerous light in his eyes. "I'll make it worth your while." Before she could refuse, his warm, firm hand took hers. He turned to his astonished mother. "Mother," he announced, his voice smooth and clear. "I'd like you to meet my wife, Lily. We were going to announce it later, but the secret's out." A wave of shocked whispers spread around them. His mother looked utterly blindsided. Alexander's smile was pure, dazzling theater. He brought Lily's hand to his lips, his gaze locked on hers. "Darling," he said, his voice a soft caress. "I think this is our song." For the rest of the evening, they were a perfect, convincing illusion. His hand was a constant, possessive warmth on the small of her back, sending shivers through her. He whispered clever comments that made her genuinely laugh, the sound surprising them both. In his arms on the dance floor, she felt a safety and connection that was utterly intoxicating. The chemistry was a live wire, thrilling and confusing. When the night ended, he walked her to a quiet spot away from the crowds. The magic was over. "You were incredible," he said, his tone shifting back to its professional cadence, though his eyes held a remnant of the evening's warmth. "You're not so bad yourself, doctor," she replied, her heart still racing. He handed her a sleek black business card. "I'll be in touch." Then he was gone, vanishing into a waiting limousine, leaving her on the curb with the cool night air a stark contrast to the heat his touch had left on her skin. She looked at the card, her mind spinning. What had she just gotten herself into? The most dangerous games are played with the heart. The following week was a brutal return to Lily's harsh reality. The memory of the ballroom, of Alexander's hand on her back, felt like a beautiful dream. She worked double shifts at the cafe, the smell of burnt coffee a world away from his expensive scent. Her father's health had worsened, and a new stack of medical bills threatened to drown them. She was in the middle of the lunch rush, balancing a heavy tray, when the cafe went quiet. It was the same collective hush from the gala. Dr. Alexander Vance stood in the doorway, his impeccably tailored suit making the modest cafe seem even smaller. His eyes found her immediately. He walked to the counter, his presence bending the very air. "Miss Reed," he said, his calm voice cutting through the noise. "We need to talk." He waited, then led her to a quiet booth. He wasted no time. "I've looked into your circumstances," he began, his tone clinical. "Your father's chronic illness, the insurmountable debt, your 2 jobs that still can't cover his treatments." He laid out the bleak facts of her life without emotion. Lily felt a flush of shame and anger. He was dissecting her despair. "I am proposing a formal arrangement," he continued, his blue eyes intense. "A 1-year contract. You will act as my wife in public. You will attend events and maintain the illusion we created. In return, I will erase all your family's debts today." He paused, letting the offer sink in. "Furthermore, your father will be moved to a private suite at Vance Medical Center. He will receive care from the top specialists. Everything will be covered. He will want for nothing." It was a miracle, a rescue rope thrown to her as she was going under. It was everything she needed. But she knew, with a sickening certainty, there was a catch. A man like Alexander did nothing without a safeguard. "Why?" she whispered. "Why me?" "You're pragmatic," he stated. "You're intelligent, graceful under pressure, and you have a powerful motivation to see this through. You are a predictable element." He leaned forward slightly. "And my past taught me a crucial lesson. Love is a liability. Emotion is a variable I will not factor in again." He slid a thin, modern tablet across the table. "The contract is all there." Her hands shook as she took it. She scrolled through the legal jargon, the NDAs, the appearance schedules, and then she saw it. Article 11. The heading was cold and stark. Emotional Attachment Termination Clause. She read it, her blood turning to ice. The clause stated, in unambiguous legal terms, that the contract was void if either party developed genuine romantic feelings. They were obligated to confess immediately. Upon confession, the contract would end, and all financial support, including her father's medical care, would stop. It was a devilish trap. He had created a game where winning required lying, but he, a man who despised deception, had made honesty the ultimate penalty. If she fell for him and told the truth, she lost everything. If she fell for him and lied, she became what he hated most. "This is cruel," she breathed, looking up at him. "It's a safeguard," he corrected, his voice as sharp and cold as a surgical blade. "I don't deal in emotional variables, Miss Reed. This is business. My terms are non-negotiable." She looked at his controlled, detached face. Then she thought of her father, his weary eyes, the bills that haunted her sleep. She had no choice. With a trembling finger, she pressed the digital signature line. The word "accepted" glowed on the screen. A profound, soul-deep chill settled over her. She had just agreed to play the most dangerous game of her life, where the cost of falling in love was total ruin. Moving into Alexander's penthouse was a surreal experience. One day she was in a cramped, familiar apartment. The next, she was in a silent, minimalist sky fortress of glass and steel. He greeted her in the vast living room, his posture as rigid as the architecture. "Welcome, Miss Reed," he said without warmth. "Your rooms are in the East Wing." He led her to a suite larger than her entire old home. It was beautiful, luxurious, and utterly impersonal. "My private suite is in the West Wing," he stated at her door. Physical distance maintains emotional clarity. Remember the clause. The reminder was a deliberate, cold splash of water. Her first official duty was a hospital fundraiser 2 nights later. The transformation was overwhelming. A team of stylists hired by Alexander descended, sculpting her into a high society figure she didn't recognize. When she emerged, he was waiting in a flawless tuxedo. His blue eyes conducted a clinical assessment. "Satisfactory," he pronounced, the word devoid of any warmth. But as he guided her to the car, his hand on her back, she felt a faint tremor in his fingers. The contact, meant for show, sent a jolt of electricity through her. At the event, he was a masterful performer. The doting, charming husband, his touch always possessive, his smile brilliant. He would lean in to whisper a witty remark, his breath warm on her neck, making her shiver. Every touch was part of the act, yet each one sent a confusing thrill through her. Their performance was so convincing, they almost lost themselves in it. The hardest moment came when his mother approached, her eyes critically scanning Lily. "Well, Alexander," she said, "you are full of surprises." "Lily is the best surprise of my life," Alexander replied smoothly, pulling her close and pressing a soft, lingering kiss to her cheek. The gesture was for his mother's benefit. But his lips were warm, his touch gentle, and for a heartbeat Lily's eyes fluttered closed. She felt a genuine, undeniable spark, and she knew, with terrifying clarity, that he had felt it too. The car ride home was thick with unspoken tension. They stood in the silent living room, the city glittering below. "You performed adequately tonight," he said, his voice tight, refusing to look at her. "You too," she whispered. A heavy silence fell. They were both thinking of the kiss, the way she had leaned into him. It had felt too real. He cleared his throat, stepping back to re-establish the distance. "Good night, Lily." He retreated to his wing. "Good night, Alexander," she whispered to the emptiness. The denial had begun. They had both felt the first dangerous spark. And they both knew that admitting it would destroy the arrangement they desperately needed. The game had just become infinitely more perilous. The strain of her double life, the constant performance, and Alexander's hot and cold behavior began to wear her down. A week after the dinner, Lily woke with a sore throat and pounding headache. She dismissed it, taking painkillers and forcing a bright smile. She had a full day, including a luncheon with the hospital board. She couldn't show weakness. By midday, a feverish chill had set in. She felt dizzy but pushed through. They were at the pre-luncheon reception when the room tilted, her vision darkening at the edges. She swayed, grabbing a table for support. Alexander, deep in conversation across the room, saw it instantly. His head snapped up, his doctor's gaze locking onto her. He saw her pallor, the slight tremble, the sweat on her brow. In a move that stunned everyone, he cut off his conversation, strode across the hall, and took her arm. "Excuse us," he announced firmly to the confused chairman. "My wife is unwell. We're leaving." He didn't wait for a reply, guiding her out, his hand a firm, supportive presence on her back, ignoring the stares. "I'm fine," she protested weakly in the elevator. "Just a little dizzy." "You're not fine," he countered, leaving no room for argument. He placed the back of his hand against her forehead, his touch surprisingly gentle. "You have a fever. You're going to bed. Now." It was an order from both her husband and her doctor. Back at the penthouse, he didn't just send her to her room. He followed, his concern a tangible force. "Get into bed," he instructed. "I'll be right back." He returned with a thermometer, medicine, and water. He took her temperature with practiced efficiency, his expression grim. 102, it's the flu. You've been pushing too hard." For the rest of the day, he became her gruff, hyper-efficient nurse. He canceled his afternoon surgeries, an unheard-of event. He brought her soup, apparently strong-arming his private chef into making it from scratch. He ensured she was hydrated and medicated. His manner was brusque, clinical, but his actions screamed of worry. That night, her fever spiked. She drifted in and out of restless dreams. At one point, she felt a cool hand on her forehead and whimpered. "Sho, it's all right," a low voice murmured from the darkness. "It's just the fever." She opened her eyes to see Alexander sitting in a chair beside her bed, a dim lamp painting shadows across his face. He was watching her, his expression unguarded. "You're still here," she mumbled, sleep-heavy. "I'm here," he confirmed softly. He reached out to check her temperature again, his hand cool and steady on her hot skin. As his hand rested there, his thumb, in a slow, unconscious gesture, stroked her temple. It was a simple, soothing motion, an act of pure, unthinking tenderness. It wasn't a doctor or a businessman. It was a man showing genuine care. He seemed to realize it the same moment she did. He snatched his hand back as if burned, a look of shock and self-anger flashing across his face. He stared at his own hand, then at her, his jaw tight with fierce irritation, at himself. He had broken his own cardinal rule. Without a word, he stood and walked out, leaving her alone in the dark, her skin tingling from his touch. He was terrified, she realized. Not of her or the flu, but of the undeniable truth that his own heart was betraying him. After Lily recovered, a new, fragile tension settled between them. Alexander's act of care and his panicked retreat had been a silent confession. They tiptoed around each other, conversations painfully polite, interactions meticulously professional, both desperately reinforcing their crumbling walls. "We have to go to Paris," Alexander announced one evening, his tone brusque, eyes on a medical file. "Paris?" Lily asked, surprised. "There's a cardiology symposium at Sorbonne University Hospital. I'm the keynote. Your presence is required. We leave Friday." The thought of being isolated with him for 3 days in the world's most romantic city was both terrifying and exhilarating. Paris was a dream, but for them, it was a beautiful, sun-drenched torture chamber. To maintain their image, they were forced into constant performative intimacy that felt dangerously authentic. They shared a suite with separate bedrooms, but a common living area. They walked arm in arm through cobblestone streets, posing for the hospital's social media team. On their first afternoon, they were directed to get romantic shots for a newsletter. They stood on the Pont des Arts, a photographer directing them. "Closer. Dr. Vance, hold her tighter. Mrs. Vance, look at him like you adore him." Alexander's arm was a brand around her waist. Lily forced a smile, tilting her head back to look at him, and was stunned by the raw, unguarded intensity in his eyes. "Perfect," the photographer shouted. Later, they bought croissants and sat on a bench in a sunlit square. For a moment, they forgot the performance. They talked about art, history, the city's beauty. He told her about a research trip here years ago. She confessed her dream of painting the Notre Dame. They shared a real, easy laugh that echoed in the square. It was natural. It was terrifying. The breaking point came on their last night. After the formal dinner, They walked back to the hotel, the air warm and scented with blossoms. They found a small, hidden square where a lone saxophonist played a haunting, romantic melody. A few couples were scattered around, wrapped in each other. Alexander and Lily stopped, captivated. They stood in the soft glow of street lamps, not speaking, just listening. The music swelled, a melody of longing, saying everything they couldn't. In the middle of the crowd under the Parisian moon, he turned to her. The world fell away. No cameras, no colleagues, no contract. There was only the music, the moonlight, and the undeniable truth in his eyes. He saw Lily. Not Miss Reed, his contractual wife. He saw her. And she saw Alexander, the man who had cared for her, who had laughed with her. Slowly, inevitably, he began to lean in. The desire in his eyes was a clear confession. His lips were inches from hers. This was it. The kiss that would end everything. And then, at the exact same instant, they both flinched back as if electrocuted. Panic flashed in their eyes, the shared, terrifying realization of what they had almost done. They had almost broken the contract. "It's late," he said, his voice a strained rasp. "Yes, we should go," she replied, breathless. They walked back to the hotel in a frantic silence, a full foot of space between them, each trapped in the private terror of their own uncontrollable hearts. The most logical plans often fail against the illogical heart. The flight home was a study in silent, agonizing tension. The near kiss had shattered their fragile truce. Denial was impossible. They returned to the penthouse and their separate wings, the physical distance a welcome but inadequate shield. They avoided each other for 2 days. The explosion came from the outside. On the third day, Lily saw a headline that froze her blood. "The Stone-Hearted Surgeon, My Life with Dr. Ice" by Isabella Sterling. It was an excerpt from Alexander's ex-wife's memoir. With a trembling hand, she clicked the link. The article was a masterpiece of character assassination, painting Alexander as an emotionally barren monster, twisting his dedication into obsession, his privacy into secrecy. The comments were a cesspool of vitriol. Lily felt a white-hot rage. It was all lies. The man described was a caricature, not the man who had laughed with her in Paris. She found him in his study, the room dark. He stood by the bar, a half-empty whiskey bottle beside him, staring into the darkness, his posture rigid with pain. "Alexander," she said softly from the doorway. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. "Go to your room. I read the article. It's all lies." He let out a bitter laugh. "Is it? A cold man who uses contracts for relationships? Sounds accurate." "No," she said firmly, walking to him and taking the glass from his hand. "She doesn't deserve your pain." He finally turned, and the raw agony in his eyes broke her heart. His walls had crumbled. "What do you know about what I deserve?" he asked, his voice thick with self-loathing. "I know," she said, her voice softening, her gaze holding his, "that the man in that article is not the man who took care of me. He's not the man who made me laugh in a Parisian square. He's not the man I see now." Her fierce, unexpected loyalty was the final blow to his defenses. The pain, the humiliation, coalesced into a single, desperate need. With a low groan from the depths of his soul, he pulled her to him. His hands tangled in her hair, his mouth crashing down on hers. It was not a tender kiss, but one of desperation and starvation, a drowning man clinging to his lifeline. It was raw, hungry, and utterly consuming. Lily met his desperation with her own, her arms wrapping around his neck, her body melting against his. This was the catastrophic, beautiful truth. The kiss ended. They pulled apart, breathless, foreheads resting together, the air crackling with the aftershock. The horror of their action dawned simultaneously. They had broken the contract. It was over. Alexander was the first to pull away, stumbling back as if struck. He stared at her, his face a mask of horror and self-loathing. "I kissed you," he said, his voice hollow. "I felt attachment." He walked to his desk, movements stiff and robotic. He was Dr. Alexander Vance, the man of rules, enforcing the most painful one he'd ever written. "According to Article 11, he recited, the words a death sentence. The contract is terminated." He sat, his back straight, and began typing, preparing the final fund transfer and severance papers. He was following protocol as it destroyed him, cutting her out to preserve his cold, empty order. Lily watched, her heart shattering. A fire born of love and fierce anger ignited in her. She would not let him. "Wait," she said, her voice trembling but firm. He didn't look up. "The terms are clear, Lily. I broke the clause. The consequences are automatic." "Then you're a fool," she shot back, standing before his desk, forcing him to look at her. The pain in his eyes stole her breath. If we're being honest, she said, her voice strong. If we're invoking the clause that demands truth, then let's be completely honest. She took a steadying breath. You weren't the only one who broke the contract, Alexander. I broke it too. Weeks ago. Maybe from the beginning. I fell in love with you. I am in love with you. Her confession hung in the air, a stunning countermove. He stared, utterly speechless. He had prepared for every variable except this. The impossible clause had created an impossible impasse. He had broken the rule, so he had to end it. But she had broken it too. If they were both in breach, who enforced the penalty? The rule designed to keep them apart now bound them in shared guilt. So what now, Alexander? She asked softly, a challenge in her eyes. You can't fire me for breaking a rule you broke yourself. Your perfect, logical, emotion-proof contract has a loophole. He looked from her defiant, loving face to the termination papers on his screen. His entire world, built on control, was upside down. He was a genius of logic, but faced with the beautiful, illogical truth of their shared love, he had no idea what to do. The mutual confession left them in an impossible state. The contract was broken, yet unenforceable. They were ghosts in the penthouse for 2 days, free-falling without a net. Finally, Lily broke the silence. She found him in his study, staring out the window, looking lost. I have to go, she said, her voice quiet but firm. I can't stay in this limbo. The contract is broken. The reason I'm here is gone. I need space. He turned, his expression mirroring her pain. He had no right to ask her to stay. He had written the rules. I understand, he said, his voice rough. Leaving felt like tearing a part of herself away. She returned to her modest apartment. The debts were gone. Her father's health was secure. Her life should have felt free, but it felt empty and colorless. The silence was a hollow ache. Alexander, meanwhile, was adrift in his cold fortress. Her absence was a physical void. He would pass her door and feel a sharp pang of loss. He had built a world to protect himself from emotion, and now he was drowning in it. A week after Lily left, his mother, Evelyn, arrived for their weekly dinner. She found him in his study, a glass of whiskey in hand, staring at a blank wall. Good heavens, Alexander, she said, her sharp eyes taking in his disheveled state. You look dreadful. Where is that girl? Lily. She's gone. Gone. I was starting to like her. She had spirit. What did you do? For the first time, Alexander told his mother the whole truth. The contract, the clause, the kiss, the mutual confession, Lily's departure. Evelyn listened, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she let out an exasperated sigh. You, my son, she said, her voice surprisingly gentle, are a brilliant idiot. She stood and walked over to him. You create a self-sabotaging rule to avoid pain. And when you find a woman strong enough to break through it, you let her leave because of it. It's the most foolish thing you've ever done. Alexander stared, stunned. His mother, the formidable socialite, was on Lily's side. She patted his cheek. I don't know about your silly agreement, but I saw how that girl looked at you. And you haven't looked this human in years. Now stop moping and fix this. Her words were an unexpected blessing. A few minutes later, from her car, Evelyn made a call. Lily, dear. It's Evelyn Vance. I hope I'm not disturbing you. My son is being an idiot, and I believe you're the only one who can fix him. The call left Lily stunned. The woman she saw as a judgmental obstacle was now her unlikely ally. But she knew the next move had to be his. He had to choose to break his own rules. Meanwhile, Alexander was unmoored. His mother's words stripped away his last defense. He had followed his rules and landed in a silent hell. He thought of Lily's loyalty, her laughter in Paris, the raw honesty in her eyes when she confessed. He realized his life was about mitigating risk, but the greatest risk was never loving at all. He couldn't stand the silence. He drove aimlessly, finding himself an hour later parked across from the small cafe where he'd first offered her the contract. He saw her inside, alone at a window table, cradling a coffee, a sad, distant look in her eyes. She looked beautiful and completely out of reach. For a long moment, he just watched, terrified. Taking a deep breath, he got out and walked in. The bell chimed. She looked up, her eyes widening. He walked to her table and sat opposite her. He just looked at her, memorizing her face. You were right, he said finally, his voice raw. I was a fool. I built a fortress of ice to protect myself from old pain, and I was freezing to death inside. He reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers. And then you came. You didn't break the walls. You just brought so much warmth you melted them. I'm terrified, Lily. I'm terrified of feeling this much. But I've learned I'm more terrified of living the rest of my life without you. He slid a document across the table. It wasn't a contract. It was a single, first-class, open-ended plane ticket to anywhere. You are free, Lily, he said, his voice thick with unmasked emotion. Truly free. The trust for your father's care is irrevocable. You owe me nothing. Take this ticket. Go anywhere, be anyone, build any life you want, and I will never bother you again. He looked at her, his heart in his eyes. But I hope, he whispered, his voice breaking, that you choose to stay. I hope you choose me. He stood up, his chair scraping the floor. He didn't wait for an answer. He had laid his heart bare with no strings, no clauses. He walked out, leaving her with the ticket to anywhere and the unspoken question. Lily sat in the quiet diner. The ticket represented absolute freedom. Paris, Tokyo, a new life as the artist she'd dreamed of being. No debts, no worries. It was everything she should want. But as she looked at it, she felt a profound, hollow ache. A world without Alexander, no matter how beautiful, felt black and white. He was the color, the warmth, the chaotic, beautiful variable that made her feel alive. She thought of his raw vulnerability, his fear, his hope. He had finally truly trusted her. She didn't need to think. Her heart had decided weeks ago. She left the ticket on the table, a silent offering to a life she no longer wanted, and walked out. Alexander was in his study, pacing. He had been staring at his phone, powerless. He heard the soft chime of his private elevator. His heart stopped. He stood frozen, listening to the footsteps. The door opened. It was Lily. She stood there, calm and certain. She didn't speak. She walked to his desk, picked up a framed photo, then walked to the bar where the open ticket lay. She placed the ticket down, then walked to a large abstract painting. "What are you doing?" he finally whispered. "I'm redecorating," she said simply. She walked back to him. "I don't want a ticket to the world, Alexander. I already have my world." She took a step closer. "It's here. With you." The relief that washed over him was profound. He crossed the space in a stride, his hands framing her face as if to ensure she was real. "I thought I'd lost you," he breathed, his forehead resting against hers. "Never," she whispered, her hands on his chest, feeling his frantic, relieved heartbeat. "You just had to come find me." He pulled her into a desperate, all-encompassing embrace, not of passion, but of homecoming. It was the first time they held each other without a contract, without rules, without fear. "I love you, Lily," he said, his voice muffled by her hair. "I love you, Alexander," she replied, her voice full of pure joy. They had found their way back by having the courage to break the rules. The weeks that followed were a revelation. They discovered the simple rhythm of being a real couple. Henry was transformed. The cold surgeon was replaced by a warm, attentive partner. He came home from the hospital, and the first thing he did was find her, his smile genuine, his eyes full of love. He converted a spare room into a sunlit art studio for her. One evening, he came home with a mysterious smile. "Put on something nice. We have a reservation." "Where?" she asked. "You'll see." He took her back to the opulent hotel where their story began, but led her to a private rooftop terrace, closed for the night. It was empty save for a single table set for two, surrounded by hundreds of flickering candles. A lone cellist played the same music from their first night. "Alexander, what is this?" she breathed. "This is where we had our first pretend moment," he said, taking her hands. "I wanted our first real one to be here too." He looked at her, his blue eyes, once so analytical, now filled with a love that made her heart ache. "Our contract is over, Lily. But I want to propose a new one. A permanent one." He slowly got down on one knee. The billionaire cardiologist was kneeling before her under the stars. He pulled out a velvet box. Inside was a simple, elegant diamond ring. "Lily Reed," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You came into my life as a variable I couldn't control, and you became the only thing I can't live without. You taught me that a life without risk is a life without joy. Our first agreement had an impossible clause. I want to make you a new one with no clauses, no conditions, no end date. Will you marry me? For real this time." Tears of joy streamed down her face. "Yes," she whispered, laughing and crying. "Yes, of course, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. He stood, pulling her into his arms and kissing her, a deep, loving kiss that promised a lifetime. 1 year later, Lily stood in the same garden where she'd once felt like an outsider. Now she was the bride, and the joy was real. Their wedding was intimate and beautiful. Her father, glowing with health, sat in the front row weeping. Evelyn sat beside him, a rare, genuine smile on her face. As Lily walked down the aisle, she only had eyes for Alexander. He waited for her with an open, adoring expression, the love in his eyes a tangible force. Their vows were simple, heartfelt, and personal. Later, at the reception, as the sun set, Alexander pulled her aside. "I have something for you," he said, a mischievous glint in his eye. He handed her a cocktail napkin from the hotel bar. "Our final contract." She unfolded it. On it, he had written a single sentence in his sharp handwriting. The final clause, Party A, Alexander, and Party B, Lily, hereby agree to break the Emotional Attachment Termination Clause joyfully and with extreme prejudice every single day for the rest of their lives. Below were 2 lines for signatures. Lily laughed, a sound of pure joy. "This is the best contract you've ever written." He produced a pen. "Shall we make it official?" They leaned against a fountain, using the cool marble as a desk, and signed their names. He folded the napkin carefully and placed it in his pocket, close to his heart. "Binding for a lifetime," he said, his voice full of bottomless love. He kissed her, a slow, sweet kiss that held all the promises of their future. Their story started with a lie whispered in a crowded room, a game of pretend with impossible rules. But it ended with the truth written on a napkin, a testament to the beautiful fact that the best rules are the ones broken by love. Hey everyone, if you felt every heartbeat of this story, do us a huge favor and smash that like button. It truly helps the channel Winds of Thought grow and bring you more tales like this. Where do you think is the most romantic city in the world? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for listening.